So my name is Dominique Poncelin. I am the president of the French Alternating Hemiplegia Foundation. So we have got 60 families in our group, and I'm personally involved in AHC because I have one child with AHC. He is 27 years old. And in our group, the youngest one is 6 months old, and the oldest one is 58 years old. So it was in 1987. At this time, he was our second child, so we had the experience of the first one. So my wife realized very quickly that something was wrong with him, because he was not able to stand his head, and he was very floppy. So we had some previous examinations. All examinations were normal, and he had his first attack. I think he was 9 months old, a double hemiplegia attack with respiratory difficulties. So we went to Children's Hospital in Paris, and we met there a specialist pediatric neurologist who is well known in the world, Professor Jean Ecardi. So he saw the child, and we had with him some discussion about the first attacks, what nature it was, the duration, the frequency, the trigger events, and so on. And he told us that he thinks that it was alternating hemiplegia of childhood. And immediately he told us that it was a very rare condition, with at this time, about 25 cases well known in France. About 150 in the world. It was in 1987. He told us that we don't know anything about this disease. We don't know the origin, we don't know the pattern, we don't know the cause, we don't know the outcome. And he told us also that there was one medicine who was tried for most of people suffering from this condition, which was called the flunarizine. So we started immediately this medicine. You have, maybe we should say, three kinds of attacks in this condition. You have what we call the hemiplegic attacks, what we call the tonic or dystonic attacks, and what we call the seizures. Seizures is epilepsy. So Patrik, when he was very young, he used to have hemiplegic attacks and seizures also, but no tonic attacks, no dystonic attacks. And this became after the age of 7 years old. So after 7 years old, the hemiplegic attacks tends to disappear, and they were replaced, in fact, by so-called dystonic or tonic attacks. The epilepsy was still there, and it was rather controlled until the age of 18. And after the age of 19, the epilepsy seems to be out of control sometimes. So he has now to be taken to the emergency unit, emergency room in hospital at least 2 or 3 times a year to control the epilepsy with other medicines. Usually he begins to have a seizure at home. So we are going to control the seizure with our protocol. We have our own protocol. We apply the protocol at home. So we do the first injections of medicines. And if the seizure is still out of control after 30 minutes, we call the emergency service, 911. And they take him in the emergency room. In fact, the only way to stop the seizure, after 30 minutes, we call that a grand mal seizure. So the only way to stop it is to put the patient in what we call artificial coma. So he has to get intubation before, artificial ventilation, and then they do another injection to stop the seizure. To put into the coma, it's very short. It's only a few minutes. But after, it will take between 8 to 20 days to go out of the coma, because they have to do this very, very slowly. They must be sure and they must control that even if in the coma, he will no more have seizures, because it's possible to have seizures even if you are in the coma. And after that, you have to recover and to leave the artificial coma, but very, very slowly. So they have to decrease the drugs very, very slowly. Now it's an average of 2 times a year. No, he's not able to walk. He used to walk, but very, very lately compared to the average AHC population. So I think I remember the first steps were made, he was 7 years old. So he was able to walk maybe a few meters only. And due to the poor condition, he had a very long-lasting attack when he was 8 years old. And after that, he stopped to do any improvement for walking. And he lost walking when he was 18 years old. He's able to understand almost everything, but he's not able to communicate that much because I think because of the mental retardation. So his speech is like a very young boy, in fact, even if he was maybe 2 or 3 years old. Yeah. Every time there are new families, and it's a great challenge for the organizers because it's very difficult for this disease to welcome the new families because it's a progressive disease, and it's not possible to tell a new family your child is going to be like this or like that, but they want to know, so they ask questions. So you have to be very pragmatic on that. Usually, because I'm the president of the French group, usually the first call, I have the first call from the families. So the families just have the diagnosis, medical diagnosis, and they look at the internet, AHC, and they found our foundation in France. So they call me. So I have the first contact. So now I'm rather used to that, and what I tell them, it is, I answer to their question, in fact, and their questions are always the same. Is my child going to have AHC all his life, or will he recover from AHC in adulthood or childhood? How long time he will be alive? Is it possible to get other children and save children, or do we have any risk to have other children with AHC? What will be his future, and so on? So my answers now are nearly always the same. I told them that AHC is not a degenerative disease in itself. The oldest one we know in France is 58 years old. So I think it's not necessary to think about death. You have to organize the life, of course, with him. I told them also that unfortunately he will still have AHC in childhood and adulthood. So the AHC will not disappear. And about having other children, I told them that in France we do not have any familial case, so all cases are sporadic. So the chance to have an AHC child is about 1 out of 1 million. So that is, of course, the probability is not 100% not to have a child, but I mean there is no contraindication to have any other child, and the doctors agree with that also. So many of the families have several children, in fact, and only one is affected by AHC. And for the outcomes, I told them that there are 3 steps in the outcomes of their children. The outcome of the children will depend on 3 points. First, the genetic level of the disease, which is written from the very beginning of their life, so you can't do anything for that. We know that some of them are more affected than others due to the genetic origin and the kind of mutation, for example, they have. The second point is the very careful and accurate medical follow-up. So for that, they have a role to play because they need the doctors to make the follow-up, but the doctors need the parents also to make the follow-up because the doctors see the child once or twice a year, and usually they have no attacks when they are at the hospital, so they do not know anything about the child. So the role of the parents is very important to describe very precisely the attacks, to have a daily log episodes, to make movies, videos, and so on. So they have a role to play in this field. And the other field, the last one, a third point, which is very much important for them, is to start as early as possible rehabilitation. But again, they have a role to play because the professionals who are going to do the rehabilitation, they are skilled in rehabilitation, but they do not know anything about AHC. So they have to educate the professionals about this disease. There are two kinds of medicines. It depends on the countries and the mentality. I think some countries are very fond of finding a cure for AHC. That means to disappear AHC. I'm not one of those. My target is not to stop AHC, is to decrease the number of paroxysmal episodes, because this is directly linked to what we call the quality of life of the children. And I'm sure, and doctors also are sure, that if we are able to decrease the number of episodes, the outcome will be better also, even if the disease is still there. So I think the discovery of this new gene, ATP1A3, will help to have a better understanding of the origin of the events and the paroxysmal events, the dystonic attacks, the plegic attacks, the seizures. And maybe we will be able in a few years to use maybe not new medicines, it could be medicines who are already existing to treat this kind of episodes and to decrease the frequency and the duration and the severity. It is true that for rare disorders, family foundations are so much important, and because it's difficult to find researchers who want to be involved in rare disorders, but when you find such researchers, they do not have any patient to study. So the only way for them to know the disease and to see patients is through the family foundations. So I think it's very, very much important for that.